What's up, guys? AC Card Shark back again, back with another just different game today. Today we're going to be hitting up Dear Esther, the Landmark Edition. I just downloaded this from the PSN. It's on sale this week till Tuesday for 50% off. So I just figured it's supposedly an hour and a half. So we're going to run through this game real quick. So the options are audio, closed captioning, we'll enable that. Large caption, okay, done. Video, brightness, field of view, crosshair disabled, controller. Alright, so all the options seem like they're in place. Go back. Wait for Brian to jump in. Said he was actually going to get this game. Alright, looks like somebody's in. It's probably Brian. Yeah, so Dear Esther, the Landmark Edition, apparently it's 60 to 90 minutes as far as beginning to end. So I'm going to try to get through the entire game right now on this session. And this is actually a game that, if you remember in my prior streams, I don't remember which one I was streaming in, I talked about this. What's up, Kelly and Brian? One of my prior streams I talked about this game. I talked about ordering from Limited Run Games, where that's the company that takes games that were previously online only and they make physical hard copies of games. Dear Esther was actually one I just ordered. And those games are so rare. It's limited to like 2,500 copies in the world. I think this one may have been 3,500 copies. But I don't want to open it. I want to leave it sealed in my collection, let it gain value, because it's one of like 25 or 3,500 in the entire world. So I paid the $4 or whatever. This is 50% off this week, so I paid the money to download it so I could play it and leave my copy sealed when it comes in the mail. So just a little bit of a background story there for you. I am going to try to get all the trophies. There is no platinum, unfortunately, in this game, but there are 10 trophies. Some of them are hidden, so I do have a guide loaded up. So there's most of the trophies, I believe it's like 8 of the 10 are just from finishing the game normally, but there are some that you need to search out. So I'm going to shut up and let this thing do its thing. Apparently it's got a great story to it. And it's really just story driven. It's actually, there's no interactivity. I think you just walk around, honestly. It's real weird. By the way, I'm finishing off a 12-ounce Red Bull. I know you guys always wonder. I popped it open earlier. Oh shit, apparently I'm supposed to move. Okay.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of the Chinese Room, and this is the Dear Esther Developers Commentary.
Hi, I'm Rob Briscoe, I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of a mod. Dear Esther started off in 2007 as a Half-Life 2 mod. That did really, really well in the modding community, which was fantastic, and as a result of that attracted the attention of Rob, who worked as the primary developer on a Source remake of the game that was released in 2012. And this year is another remake where it's been updated for a cross-platform release, and we wanted to add in this developer's commentary just to give you a bit more of an insight into some of the ideas behind the game as it came together.
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound, all of these little bits and pieces I kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
It's kind of cool that they have the director's commentary. I don't know what is up here as far as... there is some stuff down there. Now, there are some trophies. I did look it up ahead of time, because I do that. Let me see. One of which I believe I can accomplish right here. Let's see. Yep.
Come back.
Trophy. There it is. So you basically need to drown yourself. That is a trophy, believe it or not. So, pretty neat nonetheless. Don't believe I got that commentary. One of the... I can zoom, okay. Zoom in, zoom in. There is no run function, I don't believe. I know I'm trying making you dizzy. So that is one of the trophies is to kill yourself. Believe it or not. Alright, yeah, I need to get this commentary. You have to collect all the commentary as a trophy. So
part of the point of the whole game, I think, was this idea that rather than having a linear straight through version of the story, that we could have multiple story units for each place you were, and I was really interested in this idea of how you can open up that space that people can interpret. So I loved the idea that you could have two people that had played this game and then would have a conversation about it, and one of them would say, oh, what did you think about when this happened? And the other person would be like, well, that didn't happen for me. I had a completely different event happen or a completely different story happen. And it kind of feels very gamey in that way, that actually one of the things I love about writing for games is that you hand over so much control to the player that it becomes their story, and that's really, really important rather than trying to force them. So using randomised blocks of voiceover in the game and the kind of randomised prop details that Rob was talking about.
I love hearing the backstories.
Means that it gives it a really different feeling every time you go through. And that's kind of interesting for me, because I like the idea of going, well, not everyone has to have the same experience, and because it's interactive, you have the capacity to have very different experiences occupying the same space. So yeah, but balancing all that then becomes an absolute nightmare.
I think it's nice though, because everybody gets a personal experience. Like, I love reading the forums and seeing how people come. I wonder
if I get this to go stop the other one.
When I wrote the music for the mod of Dear Esther, there was absolutely no budget whatsoever for live players, so all the music was sampled. But one of the good things about that is it actually forced me to be quite creative about how I wrote the music. So with my background in sound art, I wanted to use samples in a different way that wasn't just using it to sound like a violin. I wanted to time stretch and manipulate samples to make something different and strange and quite unique. But then when we got the Indie Fund money, I had the amazing opportunity to re-record the music with live players. And that was so exciting for me, actually,
cool.
Because that's where it comes to life. And I thought long and hard about whether to write new music, going from the mod to the commercial version, but actually I decided that my initial and original emotional response to the game was probably going to be the strongest response and reaction that I had. So I just literally, the music that I'd written for samples, I then wrote out for live instruments.
I get it.
But what
Next.
Everything about Esther for me is a dream. The landscape is not an island, it's the dream of an island. The music is like music that you wake up because you've heard in your sleep, but you're not conscious of hearing it. And the language in the story was supposed to be like that as well. It didn't matter the sense it made. It was more about the kind of the shapes it created, if that makes sense. So that the words would kind of were like being in water, like listening to something underwater. It'd be this. So people have asked why the Dear Esther's set on a Hebridean island. What's really interesting about this is one of those times when your kind of aspirations as an artist and the practical realities kind of dovetail. We knew that we had to have some way of limiting the player from disappearing off the play space, and when we made the original, it was a mod, and because it was a Half-Life 2 mod, you kind of had Eastern European city, spaceship, or blasted, desolate landscape, where you had 3 options if you didn't want to start making any other assets. So it started off with these practical constraints. We don't want to set it on a spaceship, we don't want to set it in an Eastern European city, so it's got to be on this kind of like this desolate landscape. And we want to limit the player, so an island seems like a natural choice. And it's really interesting how you start from that, and we had this big lump of clay on a table that we were carving out paths and things to annoying the cleaners and things like that. And Jess and I were talking, and Jess started making sort of snippets of music to kind of go in there. And then all of a sudden we just went, oh, that's the story. Oh, that's what happened here. But it really started, I think, from the place. And when we started looking at photographs of Boré, we started going and reading some of the history behind it. Suddenly that was it. And it just was really, really naturally became, this is the place. This symbol on the beach, which is the golden ratio, it's one of the only things that's really left explicitly from the mod. In the original mod, there was an awful lot of more kind of symbols and kind of a much more kind of mystical, sort of magical element to the island. There was a lot of very weird stuff in there. And a lot of them came out of the commercial version because they felt like they were a little bit explicit. And instead, there's a lot more hidden kind of codes and symbols in there.
What's up, Riley?
There's still some stuff which you can only actually see or experience if you are not playing the game, if you're looking at it from editor. We had in the original mods things like trees planted to mirror the shape of the M5.
PSN, it's a downloadable game.
There's a whole bunch of things that are there to represent star clusters and all kinds of things
limited run
like
games just put a hard copy out, which I ordered, and I wanted to play it, so I downloaded the copy. It's 50% off right now in the store.
For us, in terms of the design of it, of going, you've got
your like a walking simulator,
your conscious, explicit play experience, but games are always constantly.
So something I wanted to do as an artist was create some kind of reward for the player when they explore the island. There are some areas of the game where it's a little bit more quieter, there's no music or there's no voiceovers. So I kind of wanted to create a bit of an incentive for people to explore. And you'll find around the island that these kind of like random scattered items that are usually slightly out of place from the environment themselves, but in another aspect they actually bring a little bit of story to the island itself, usually to the island or to the actual protagonists or you know, the characters that surround it. So you'll find that around the island these little props and stuff. Just keep your eye out for it if you're exploring.
I'm exploring, but I don't... No, that's not what I wanted to do. I don't want to drown. Where the hell am I supposed to go? I mean, I could probably walk. No. How am I lost in a walking simulator? Doesn't make much sense to me. I go around this way. Go around this way. What the hell is that? Oh, my dog scratching herself. Oh, it's
so something I wanted to do as an artist
yeah, I heard you already.
Was create some kind of reward for the player when they explore the island. There are some areas of the game where it's a little bit more quieter, there's no music or there's no voiceovers. So I kind of wanted to create a bit of an incentive for people to explore. And you'll find around the island that these kind of like random scattered items that are usually slightly out of place from the environment themselves, but in another aspect they actually bring a little bit of story to the island itself, usually to the island or to the actual protagonists or you know, the characters that surround it. So you'll find around the island these little props and stuff. Just keep your eye out for it if you're exploring.
Yes, I'm still exploring, and I still can't find where I'm supposed to go, director guy. Alright, let's see. So here's the director's commentary locations at the start of the chapter. Enter the house in front of you, follow the Rocky Mountain path to get the third one, keep following path along the beach, walk around in between the mountain and collect the commentary you see ahead of you, keep walking forward to the dead end where the water is flowing into, turn around, return back to the beach and walk up the stairs. Okay, so I gotta walk up these stairs. Okay. Walk up the stairs, keep walking up the mountain path, keep walking up the mountain path. Basically, we're going all the way up the mountain. Hopefully it unlocks some kind of story. Apparently, I mean, I watched reviews on this game, and they said something along the lines
So
of,
people have asked why the
we already heard
rest
this.
is set on a Hebridean island.
Stop talking,
What's really
Dan.
interesting about this is one of those times when your kind of aspirations as an artist and the practical realities kind of dovetail. We knew that we had to have some way of limiting the player from disappearing off the play space. And when we made the original, it was a mod. Because it was a Half-Life 2 mod, you kind of had Eastern European city, spaceship,
I mean, I had to go down to that dead end
blasted,
anyway, so.
desolate landscape. We had three options if you didn't want to start making any other assets. So it started off with these practical constraints. If we don't want to set it on a space.
Shut up.
One of the things you're always trying to do as a composer is create memorable themes. And a
like
slight
Julia
confession
Child.
is that probably the most memorable theme, which is Remember in Dear Esther, wasn't actually created for the game. Rob's looking shocked. So it was actually from a piece of choral music that I'd written years before, based on the Christina Rossetti poem called Remember. And one of the things I was talking about earlier was how I didn't have any budget. So I had this piece of choral music.
You better hurry up and talk, Jess.
And I thought, hang on, this is absolutely perfect.
Getting another
for
one
Esther.
soon.
But I don't want to use
I'm
all
not
of
waiting
it.
for
so
you.
the only bit that you actually get in the game is the first line of the choral piece of music.
Shut up, Jess. Oh.
White Lines.
Yeah.
They actually did this. It was really cool. I found this historical document. They used to do this on Bora and the Hebrides. If their disease broke out,
Really?
they'd actually chip out and expose the chalk. So if you're on a boat and you were coming to the island, you'd know not to land because it was infectious, which is the coolest, most amazing. It's one of those things where you go, it's almost impossible as a writer to come up with something as cool as that. It just has to be something that was actually done. And it's so sad as well. And I love this bit and the fact that we can do it because it feels really real because it references a real thing. And I don't know, there's something really special about that. But it was always one of those bits in the game that I thought, we've got to be able to represent this somehow. We have to be able to get these things in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting.
It's a
I
beautiful
actually
game.
didn't know that was actually based historically in real life. But that's really cool. Because, I mean, my thing about the White Lines is that it was this completely surreal thing, but also it was kind of...
Next.
Something that I wanted to bring through in the art of the game was the same kind of fidelity that you find in both Jessica's music and Dan's writing, in the same kind of way that you have all of these little
Yeah, I think
details.
this entire
It's
game was
very,
made by 3 people.
close attention to
Crazy as that.
detail that kind of really bring richness to the story. And something that was missing in the original mod version was just this lack of a visual.
There's a scene in Donnie Darko where Drew Barrymore's playing his English teacher, and she talks about Celador as being the most beautiful word in the English language, and about it's the sound of the words together. And Dear Esther actually comes from the introduction from a Faith No More song, the Crab song on the first album, Introduce Yourself. And there's a point where I think it's Chuck at that point as the vocalist before Mike Patton just says Dear Esther, and it really lodged with me because the sound Dear Esther just has a really amazing sound to it. And I think when we started making it, and the idea of it being this series of letters to someone came through, it just came straight back out of going, that's just a really beautiful sounding combination of words. And I think that really sums up the whole approach to the writing in Dear Esther of what's the most beautiful combination of words and images we can put together, and to do it that way rather than writing a traditional plot as such. So yeah, Dear Esther, Faith No More and Doom, that's where it comes from.
Huh. It's kind of cool. Alright, now there's something I have to find before finishing this level. Near the end of the chapter, you'll see a pile of pillar stones. And there's an urn to the right of the pillar stones in the grassy area. So I gotta make sure I don't miss that. Pile of pillar stones. I'll make sure it's not up here. Pile of pillar stones. That's not a pile, that's a big stone. So I'm thinking... Just play a video. I don't want to miss it. Huh, okay. There's a circle of stones? I didn't see that. I'm heading back. Because I'm, I guess, oblivious. What was it up here when the commentary was? I don't remember seeing it. No. That's not what I just saw. Maybe I didn't pass it yet. It's just real weird. Well, when he was walking, there was a... like that blinking signal was in the background, I believe. The right side of this circle, so when approach the stones, take it to you to find a full I don't want to miss this. Yeah, you're walking. That's the lighthouse.
White Lines.
Yeah.
They actually did this. It was really cool. I found this historical document. They used to do this on Bora in the Hebrides. If their disease broke out, they'd actually chip out exposed chalk. So if you're on a boat and you're coming to the island,
it's cool the first time. I don't want to hear it again.
Which is the coolest, most amazing. It's one of those things where you go, it's almost impossible as a writer to come up with something as cool as that. It just has to be something that's actually done, and it's so sad as well. And I love this bit and the fact that
I think it's that circle of stones down there.
It feels really real because it references.
I just want to make sure I didn't pass it.
And I know there's something really special about that. But
all right, let's go.
It was always one of those bits in the game that I thought we've got to be able to
control with one hand, drink by Red Bull while playing.
In here.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I actually didn't know.
That's a wonderful combination.
Historically in real life, but that's really cool because my thing about the white lines is that it is.
Shut up.
Something that I wanted to bring through in the art of the game was the same kind of fidelity that you find in both Jessica's music and Dan's writing.
I figured this was a good game for today.
Kind of way that you have all of these little details is very.
I'm not looking to dive into a long game, and this is only supposed to be like an hour to an hour and a half.
That kind of really bring richness to the story, and something that was missing in the original mod version was just
a short game.
There's a scene in Donnie Darko where Drew Barrymore's playing his English teacher, and she talks about Celador as being the most beautiful word in the English language, and about it's the sound of the words together. And Dear Esther actually comes from the introduction from a Faith No More song, the Crab song on the first album, Introduce Yourself. And there's a point where I think it's Chuck at that point as the vocalist before Mike Patton just says Dear Esther, and it really lodged with me because the sound Dear Esther just has a really amazing sound to it. And I think when we started making it and the idea of it being these series of letters to someone came through, it just came straight back out of going, that's just a really beautiful sounding combination.
One of the things that's been most commented on with the audio and the music in Dear Esther is how sparse it is. And that was a really deliberate tactic. I wanted to leave room for the player to think and to dream and to wonder and to put their own interpretation into what was happening. And I think the problem with so much modern media is how bombarded we are constantly. It's the kind of MTV, flash in your face, constant music. And Dan and I watch a lot of drama together, and there really is constant music.
Which is constantly telling you what you should feel, like really clearly. And it's like being kind of beaten up by the music sometimes.
And when you read a lot of reviews of Dear Esther, a lot of people say...
Shut up.
So there's a lot of places in the game where you see a lot of strange things, and this is very deliberate. One of the things we wanted to do is just kind of like not spoon feed the player every little piece of story. We kind of just, some things are literally just in there to just kind of let you think and let you decide on whatever you want to bring to the story yourself. So it's kind of like I approached it like an impressionist painting where you've got like this kind of very vague outline of things, but if you stare at it enough, you can kind of like fill in the spaces, and kind of the image comes together on its own. So a lot of these kind of strange pieces of geography and stuff, that's really kind of deliberate in some ways, just to kind of keep the player's mind open and kind of bring their own interpretations of the story through that.
I didn't go near the cave entrance. Shit. I think I missed the commentary over there. Is it this way? I don't know where the fuck I am anymore. It's like Firewatch. I don't know where the hell I am.
So there's a lot of
without the commentary. There's like literally not a word
places
spoken
in the game where you see
don't know what the hell's going on.
Strange things, and this is very deliberate. One of the things we wanted to do is just kind of like not spoon feed the player every little piece of story. We kind of just, some things are literally just in there to just kind of let you think and let you decide on whatever you want to bring to the story yourself. So it's kind of like I approached it like an impressionist painting where you've got like this kind of very vague outline of things, but if you stare at it enough, you can kind of like fill in the spaces and kind of.
One of the things that's been most commented on with the audio and the music in Dear Esther is
you can turn it off in the options for sure, but
and that was
one of the trophies in this game is to actually collect all the commentary, so I have to have the commentary on.
For the player to think and to dream and to wonder and to put their own interpretation into what was happening. And I think the problem with so much modern media is how bombarded we are constantly. It's the kind of MTV, flash in your face, constant music.
I think the central question to the entire experience, for most people that have played it or are talking about it, is this idea of, is the island real? Is what's going on a literal event of a man walking across a Scottish island, or is it a dream that he's had? Does the island even exist? And one of the things that we try to do with the writing is to constantly lull the player into a position where they got an understanding, they made a decision about what they thought was going on, and then to undercut it. So you never actually were able to settle on any one interpretation. And that was the challenge I set myself when I wrote the original mod, was can we put a story in a game that not only lends itself to multiple interpretations, but there is no stable interpretation. Every single interpretation you have will always have questions, and you'll never be able to fully trust what you think you understand about the game. So it's challenging, I think, for that result. It becomes quite a challenging kind of game story because of that, because you don't ever get that situation to go, I understand it now, I can walk away from this thing and it's all closed off and it's tidy. It was a very deliberate attempt to say, no matter where you think you are with this story, you're always questioning whether or not that's right.
I am a trophy whore. I need every trophy. I'm gonna pack them away in my total. Well, a game like this that's so quick like this too, it's just you know, it's easy enough. It's not like I have to complete all these weird feats to get them. It's just literally walking to find like spots. No trophy left behind. That's the motto of the army of AC Card Shark. No trophy left behind. See, this music's actually really nice. Nice and laid back. My dog just like put her head up like, huh? Looking at me like, what is that? Even though she hears nothing because my headset's on. This sad music, I'm looking at my dog, it's like something sad's happening to my dog. George Carlin did a whole bit about that. He's like, you ever think of something really, really sad, and then look at your dog, and it's like it's happening to your dog? It's so true.
So there's a lot of places in the game where you see a lot of strange things, and this is very
I really
deliberate.
didn't mean to walk through that. I wanted to hear the music.
One of the things we wanted to do is just kind of like not spoon feed the player.
But this one actually explains everything.
We kind of just, some things are literally just in there to.
I guess Riley left.
Let you think and let you decide on whatever you want to bring to the story yourself. So it's kind of like
Riley
I approached it like an impressionist painting where you've got like this kind of very vague outline of things, but if you stare at it enough, you can kind of like fill in the spaces and kind of
that's why
the image comes together on its own. So a lot of these kind of strange pieces of geography and stuff that's really kind of deliberate in some ways, just to kind of.
I know you don't like sirens.
Keep the player's mind open and kind of bring
stop sneezing on me,
their own interpretations
asshole.
of the story through that.
Oh, nasty! Like I'm scared. Hold me. Just like completely sneezed all over me multiple times. Fucking gross. Go lay down, dick. Oh, trophy earned. That's the end of level 1. Okay. I literally not sure what the fuck that was, but okay. Hey, Donnelly, was that for finished chapter of the Lighthouse? Yeah. Simply finish chapter 1 of the Lighthouse. The game is very linear and you really shouldn't get lost. Progress is saved at the end of each chapter. That's when you get that trophy. Okay. start of the chapter. There's one.
When I was originally thinking about how to write the music for the game, I suddenly realised that you don't see anybody in the game, and the most important character as such is the island itself. So one of the things that I did with the music was to write the island as if she or he were a character in its own right. And that's really important, I think, that you are going through this space and actually it's completely devoid of people, but the music in a way populates the island, and that the voice of the island speaks to you through the music.
All right, let's talk about walking. Let's do it. We're gonna address the elephant in the room, the very, very slow-moving elephant in the room. So this might be a longer conversation because it kind of fits with that. So Esther was the first of the what are now called walking simulators, and it was really interesting that for us it didn't feel that weird to have a game that was slower than normal, where actually there was lots of time to just walk around and think and look at things. And it was amazing at the time how this was seen as completely revolutionary, and it's really interesting, and it's amazing to see how many other games have kind of like taken it on board. For me, it came from, I didn't see it as being odd to have a game where very little happened, where you thought about what you were doing. For me, it was kind of interesting that you could play some of the best moments in Doom are the bits where nothing's happening and you're just doing it, or System Shock, or those games that I absolutely love. Those quiet moments were the really powerful ones. But Esther is definitely slower than a lot of games, and I think that's actually why it's lasted. I think if we did have moments where we went, should it be faster, should we put a sprint button in, but I'm so pleased that we kind of held our nerve and went,
kind of cool.
No, just as like in real life, I don't run everywhere because that would be... The radio mast in Dear Esther is obviously, there is a really important kind of design feature as well as its place within the story. And that, I think, came from, it was really interesting, it being a Half-Life mod to begin with, and the Citadel in Half-Life 2, that it tells you how far you are through the game. You're always looking up to the skyline, am I closer to the Citadel, can I see it? And it lets you know how near you are to the end of the game. And it was really important because Esther's so open in a way, and because there isn't this, you're not using kind of shootouts or kind of gating it with combat encounters to kind of constantly keep you moving. That it was really, really important that you always had that focal point of going, I know exactly from the beginning of the game, virtually right from the start, you know where you're going, you know where the game's going to end up, and you know that sooner or later you're going to be either at the base of that thing or climbing that thing, and it's always there, that red light. And I think particularly with the colour palette of the game, the fact that you've got this very, very, very clear red light that's unlike any of the other colours in the game immediately tells you as a player, this is what the shape of this thing is going to be, this is where I'm going, this gives me a purpose.
So something you'll notice as you look around the environment is you know, from a distance you see the landscape. It's kind of a beautiful place in some ways, but something I wanted to bring to the game was that there's this second layer beneath the surface. Whereas if you look at things closely, you see that the actual island itself is very polluted. It's kind of very rotten. You know, everywhere you look, every rock, every grass surface, it has this layer of filth on it, and it's kind of been put in there just to kind of emphasize further that this island's a really unpleasant place to live. It's like if you scratch the surface, you see like just how corrupt this island is.
Kind of neat. Kind of neat.
We cast and did all the voice direction for Esther ourselves for the mod, and it was basically Jess and I on a casting website just listening to people's show reels and finding what's the voice of this thing. And there was never any question about Nigel. I think we heard his show reel for the first time around. It's probably been listened to sort of 30 or 40 actors, and we started listening to his show reel and just both looked at each other and went, that's it, that's him. And it was amazing when Nigel came in. We had, I think, a day and a half to do the whole thing. And he just did that amazing thing that really, really great actors did. If he just walked in, got in front of the microphone, and more or less did the entire thing in one take. And we did hardly any retakes on anything. It just felt like his instinct for the character in the game was so strong that he just, without virtually any direction, just came in and just got it. And one of the hardest things with the voiceover that we did was when we went from the mod, which had 3 potential narrative units per queue, to 4 potential narrative units per queue, was not only finding new bits of writing that kind of complemented and played off what was there in the original mod, but for Nigel to come back in, nearly 5 years later, and to just re-find that voice in exactly the same way and deliver it in a way that fitted in and complemented it was a real testament to his ability as an actor, I think. That apart from we had spent quite a lot of time trying to make the sound actually sound the same in terms of mic placement and things like that, but in terms of the actual delivery of those new monologues, you wouldn't know that was both written and acted sort of 4.5 years after the original thing was done. So the one person who's not in the room sort of today but deserves a huge amount of credit for how the game kind of eventually was delivered, but also I think in terms of how the game has lasted, a huge amount of respect needs to go to Nigel Carrington for his work on it.
I guess more than 3 people made this game. I keep hearing things in my headset that sound like you're in my room with me, and they're not. They're in the game. Kind of neat. Alrighty. And a big hole.
So this hole in the ground was kind of a difficult thing in some ways. It's a bit of a challenging aspect of the game. Because, in some ways, it kind of like, I think for me, we wanted to have this kind of this pit here, and I wanted the player to be able to actually go as close as possible and like look over the edge and you know, kind of have this feeling of dread and stuff. But the other issue that we faced was like, what happens if the player just jumps into the hole? Like we have no real death in the game, and from a design point of view, Dan, I mean, I don't know what you
it was really hard because you know, it was a game where we couldn't let the player die. We didn't want to have respawns, but we had to handle the fact that there would be both accidents where the player would fall off a cliff or something, but also the deliberate urges of the player. You know, the first thing you're going to do is go, great, there's an ocean, how far out can I go? Or there's a cliff that's really high, can I jump off it? And how do you have death in a game where you can't have the player die? Because if the player starts breaking up the experience by dying and reloading, then you're in you start breaking the experience a lot. So
yeah, I mean, we didn't want to also have like artificial boundaries, you know, where it's like an invisible wall. Like if you take a look through the game, you'll never see a place where you think you can get to but you can't. There's always some kind of actual natural boundary or man-made boundary. So
all right, so
that was the other thing. We didn't really want to.
Here's another trophy. You
this
ready?
Invisible wall around this thing. So
it kind of the whole drove the way in which that sort of the very weird audio visual, probably one of the most dreamlike bits in the game, where if you do die and you get the kind of the heartbeat and the strange flashes of visuals. And I think in a lot of ways, if we hadn't had the hole there and we hadn't had a place where we go, right, players will jump in this hole, we have to start from that basis, they will throw themselves down this hole, it kind of gave us the impetus to really, really focus on it. And I think the stuff like the drowning deaths and the cliff deaths are strong because the hole was there, and I'm not sure if the hole hadn't been there, whether or not we'd have arrived at that way of handling it, which I'm really proud of. I think it's a really incredibly creative, interesting way of handling a player going out of bounds and of actually being able to reset the game when the player's basically done something you ideally wouldn't want them to do.
Yeah, I kind of think it fits well with...
One of the really important jobs of a composer, I think, is to provide the player or the listener with different emotional tones and states. And up until this point in the game, the music has been very sparse, very intimate, and very isolating in a way. But the island is also a beautiful and magnificent place, and what I wanted to do at this point,
I wrote really good music, but I have a really annoying voice.
That was really epic. So we go from that shift in scale where it's very intimate and small to suddenly realising that this is an extraordinary and magical place to be, as well as a difficult and quite sad and melancholic place to be. So the string players were instructed at this point to play with much more vibrato.
Top of the hill.
Up until this point, they've played in a very sort of Scottish style.
Vibrato.
Actually, no vibrato, very plain playing. But this was a really beautiful cue to write, actually, because that has that scale. You suddenly realise that the island is really big, and you have this beautiful vista, and the music then shifts, so the player can actually, just for a moment, I think, enjoy being where they are.
Yeah, I think that's it. Can I? Yeah, I was going to say, this is actually one of my favourite parts of the game. It's just where everything, all the elements kind of come together perfectly. You've got the music, which is just epic, as Jess has said. You've got the landscape, which is kind of like this big open space. You've got all the little bits and pieces that I put into the detail of the environment, like the movement. There's leaves blowing around, there's the clouds in the sky, there's the mist rising off of the grass, and then
inside the bothy there is a randomised chance that you can find an ultrasound picture on the table, and I think it's the one instance of randomisation in the game that is like the pinnacle of it, because the idea that Esther was pregnant when she died changes everything emotionally about how you understand the story. And not to say that you don't care as much if you don't find it, but it just adds this other layer of just the ground falls away from him the first time I saw it, and the meaning of the crash in Esther's death just means so much more when you go, it's not just about her, there was an unborn child here. And I think that's where the randomisation just hits its absolute peak, because it's one tiny detail that may or may not be there. But if it's there, it's going to fundamentally change the way you feel about the entire thing. And that's the strength that the randomisation elements in Esther kind of provide, that you go, your likely kind of feeling about the story and your understanding about the story can be changed so absolutely by the occurrence or not of one tiny little prop detail. And that's something which, those moments, I think, are what make it really, really special. So So as you leave the bothy and the seagull takes off, that's the one jump scare in the game, which is kind of interesting, because when we made it, we kind of had to, we kind of called it a ghost story, but there was no intention, really. We kind of wanted this dreamy, hallucinatory type thing. But when it came out, people started coming back and saying, this game is absolutely terrifying. I was really, really frightened. And that was really amazing. And I think it's because nothing happens. We're so trained in games to go, there's stimulus all the time, that if nothing happens, you're waiting for something to happen. And kind of, I tend to go back to again and again the whole sequence in Dead Space 2 when you go back to the Ishimura, and it's like the best bit of Dead Space 2, because for what feels like hours, but it's probably only about 15 minutes, nothing happens and no necromorph comes at you, and it's absolutely terrifying because it's just this space and you're just left in it. So I think the kind of the bird here is really interesting because it can actually really, really make you jump. But I don't know if that was part of why people were saying that the game was really scary, but it was a real surprise when people started coming back and saying, this is a frightening game. And I don't know how much of that is to do with the ideas in the game are frightening when you think about them, and how much of it is to do with just the emptiness and the lack of...
So one of the things that influenced the visuals quite a lot was the tech limitations at the time, and also the kind of themes of the game. Like, tech-wise, we were never ever going to kind of achieve photorealism, and I think that was a good thing. I mean, really, it made us sort of stretch out into other areas, and for me as an artist, it kind of made me think a little bit more creatively. I did a few tests at the beginning, and when I realized this wasn't possible, I kind of went back and I kind of did some research on different styles, and one of the ones that really struck me was this kind of impressionistic painterly style, where it's kind of like there's just enough shape and color there for you to form an image, but a lot of it is just your imagination. It's kind of like the believability of the environment is in your mind.
Okay.
So this is something that I really wanted to bring over into the game. And you'll see a lot of landscapes that kind of look very surreal, very kind of unreal, and that's mainly due to this impressionistic style.
No, I don't want to hear that again. It did not look like I could go that way. It's crazy.
We should probably talk about some of the inspirations behind it. I'm on a strict you don't talk about Stalker kind of thing going on here. But when Rob and I started talking, I think one of the first things that we kind of discovered was how much we're both obsessed with Stalker. And I think that was one of the major things behind it in terms of when people talk about game inspirations. I mean, for me, there's a lot of FPS stuff in there, Doom, System Shock, but I think Stalker probably more than anything else. And Roadside Picnic, the Strugatsky novel that Stalker's based on, of the idea of this incredible space that you didn't understand, that's simultaneously beautiful and threatening. And I think sort of Tarkovsky's kind of films kind of play into that as well, particularly his version of Stalker, that you want to have this place that you feel rather than think about. And for me, that was like really kind of core to all of the inspirations for the game. Was this is a space that is about feeling, not thinking.
Yeah, I think the movies in particular. I think I hadn't watched the movies. I'd read the book. I played the game, and when I watched the movie, it kind of all made sense to me, like why I like the game so much and why I like the story. It's just like every shot is like a painting. It's like every shot has its
I love like every person who
story
jumps in the stream is like,
there's very
dude, what
little
the fuck is
dialogue
this
in the
game?
actual movie itself. There's just these long, lingering shots, and each shot
It's
is
really,
amazingly beautiful.
I miss Homefront.
And it's kind of desolation. And for me, that was like a huge influence. You know, like trying to bring some of that through into the environments. So that is definitely something I'm going to struggle not to talk about. But the game as well. I'd say the actual Stalker game has a big place in my heart. Like gaming-wise, it's one of the reasons I got into game art in the first place.
Yeah.
So that to me is a big part of it too. One of the more interesting and challenging things to do in the visual side of things is to kind of create an emotional
the monologue and the talking
player.
is actually something I need to do for
with
trophies.
The music, it's very strong.
And it's not even a monologue. This is the actual game.
Help you to feel what the character's feeling, but to kind of really create an atmosphere and to create emotion, it's very difficult. So I designed a few things very subtly within the environment to kind of plant imagery into your mind and kind of make you feel certain things. With this shipwreck on the beach, you can kind of, like, if you look at it from certain...
One of the really important images in the game is the radio mast. And the soundscapes that I wrote for the game are really tied into this idea. So it's the concept of the tortured sounds that they're so broken down, they're so manipulated. And it really is supposed to represent the inner state of the protagonist at this point. It's that
This is another of my favourite bits in the game, where you come along the edge of the sort of gully and you find hundreds of books, and it's one of the first times where most explicitly there's the suggestion that nothing you're seeing is real.
Rob,
because
Dan,
there's just
and
no
all those,
way
they're
that
all
this
the
can
people who
exist.
made the game.
It's a really
Directors.
amazing, uncanny moment.
Director's commentary.
But it works, I think, for me, because you just go, I don't understand it, but it's lodged somewhere in my head, and I can't get rid of it, and I can't unsee this. And I think for me, like in terms of my influences from books, I mean, there's the obvious sort of stuff like with Burroughs, Cut Up and things like that going on. But it comes to the kind of books that I really love, that, like Roadside Picnic, or the other one by the Strugatskys as well, I absolutely love, is The Ugly Swans, that's just full of these images that you go, I don't understand, I literally have no idea what's going on here, but I can't shake it, it's just got its hooks in me. And I think more recently you've got books like Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation does this so well, where nothing is understandable, but you feel the logic, but you can't understand the logic, but you feel like the logic's there. And that, I think, is a really powerful thing that games are so good at doing, of creating these things. And I think where a lot of game writing for me becomes kind of the wheels fall off it, is that they have these amazing ideas and then suddenly there's this huge rush of going, right, we've developed this mythos and we've shown you all the tips of the iceberg which are really interesting, but now we're just going to show you the whole iceberg. And actually that's never that satisfactory as a player because it robs the mystery. And I think the best game writing is those kind of moments where you go, I feel like there's something just outside the edge of my vision or just on the edge of my hearing, but it's the confidence to go, that's it. That's all you get. And the rest of it is up to your imagination. And I think it does loop back to games like Stalker. I think Skyrim at its best does it so well, where you just have these moments where you think, I want to know, but it's going to be down to my imagination to draw those things. And the player's imagination is the most powerful thing you've got in your design kit. There is nothing you can put on screen. There is nothing you can do with audio. There's nothing you can do with dialogue that will ever be as powerful as the player's own imagination. So if you oversell the idea and oversell the image, what you're actually doing is you're kind of not only robbing the player of the opportunity to invest in the game, but you're also fundamentally opting for a weaker tool than what the player can bring to the experience themselves.
Huh. Trophy. No, it was not a free download. It was like $4, I think, something like that. It's on sale this week on the PlayStation Store. I have a hard copy of this coming from Limited Run Games, which I don't open my Limited Run titles. So I wanted to basically get the downloadable version to play, so I don't have to open up my hard copy. I'm actually enjoying it so far. I mean, I knew what this game was before I bought it. It's a walking simulator. It's basically just taking in the environments and just kind of relaxing, which is kind of nice. Nice change of pace. Alright, so chapter 3, at the start of the chapter, where's the urn? Chapter 3. Midway through the caves, you'll find that first bridge that you can cross. Cross the bridge and then hug the wall in front of you as you make your way towards the right area of this wall to find the urn. Okay. Start of the chapter after exiting the green tunnel.
The caves in the game are really interesting because it's a very tonal shift within the whole visual look of the game. It's kind of like this more organic, more surreal, dreamlike landscape compared to what you're used to before this point. It's we kind of use the visuals.
When I play through it more than once now,
kind of unreal theme,
but
very
this is
subtly,
really just an interesting game.
But here it's
really cool
kind of
to
at the forefront.
see the world that they crafted and
it's,
the detail.
To me, it's kind of been designed as this kind of journey
landscape.
through the inner self,
the music
through the body.
is amazing.
And it's really designed to be.
I mean, picture this game without the guy talking.
It's probably the most pivotal music cue in the game, and it's the one that most people write to me about to say that they are absolutely obsessed with and they love. It's the only music cue that has singing. It has a female voice, and I think that's a really important shift for me, that you've gone from this beautiful string music, but it's quite abstract, into what is effectively a song. And with lyrics, so you're actually explicitly saying something as a composer at this point. The other thing that I think it's important to say for me is it's the biggest shift.
Wow.
I just want to say that I think you can divide caves in games into pre and post Dear Esther. I think that it's just a way of breaking away from reality into saying
so insane.
What you can do with these spaces that actually makes them this incredibly, much more vividly colourful and much more kind of interpretative and look for it. And it's really interesting that I look at caves now in games and I find myself going, that's a very Rob Briscoe cave. And I think that's an amazing thing to have achieved. So I think it's one of those. It's great paying other people's work compliments.
Even without talking, what's the purpose of it?
But I think it is.
Basically, you'll find out at the end.
Particularly,
there has been zero talking so far.
Blend between the audio and visuals. That just. It's a real high watermark. I kind of. It's one of the areas in all of the games we've made that I'm most proud of.
I think as well, you think you know what you're getting with Dear
Yes.
Esther for the first 45 minutes of the game, wherever we are at this point, and then you step into something completely unexpected and completely new, and I think it just throws the player such a curveball in such a wonderful way.
Huh. So apparently something's coming. Alright, apparently I was actually supposed to jump into the water. Okay. That was a big circle around. Go up the blue tunnel here.
This, for me, is
damn it, I didn't want to hear it again.
The most pivotal music cue in the game, and it's the one that most people write to me about to say that they are absolutely obsessed with and they love. It's the only music cue
this is such a cool landscape right here. It's amazing.
Has a female voice. I think that.
I just want to say that I think you can divide caves in games into pre and post Dear Esther. I think that it's just
that's pretty damn cool.
A way of breaking away from reality into saying what you can do with these spaces that actually makes them this incredibly, much more vividly colourful and much more kind of interpretative and look for it. It's really interesting that I look at caves now in games and I find myself going, that's a very Rob Briscoe cave. And I think that's an amazing thing to have achieved. So I think it's one of those. It's great paying other people's work compliments. I enjoy that because you never feel like you're being big-headed about yourself. But I think it is. I think particularly it does come again down to that blend between the audio and visuals that just it's a real high watermark. I kind of it's one of the areas in all of the games we've made that I'm most proud of.
I think as well, you think you know what you're getting with Dear Esther for the first 45 minutes of the game, wherever we are at this point, and then you step into something completely unexpected and completely new, and I think it just
seriously,
throws
I love the
player
graphics of these caves. Blow me away.
Such a curveball in such a wonderful way.
For an indie studio to make a game like this, it's pretty damn good.
I think when you're designing a game, it's very easy to get very locked into what the system can do. And you're trying to deal with all the different variations of things that if a player does this, then this. And we have to deal with the consequence here. And our lead designer, Andrew, and I talk about this all the time, about you might have an idea, but then how does this radiate out throughout the entire system? And you get very caught in the idea of what the system has to be and how robust the system has to be and this kind of thing. And I think what's really important as a sort of a designer, as a creator,
that's the thing. I can actually turn the commentary off. I just want to get the trophy for collecting them all.
And that the system can be whatever you want it to be. But if
I'm
the
not
game
do a
isn't
second
running in the
playthrough
player's head as
just
opposed
to
to on the
commentary,
screen, then you're missing a trick. You're not letting the game be everything it could be. And I think the great thing about working with a game as simple as Esther in a way is that those sort of consequences of player interaction, there's not a huge number of them in the way that there might be with a very mechanically complex game. So you can really heavily focus on what is the game experience that's being played out within the player's sort of mind and heart at the moment. And there are other, sort of, I know this is a kind of a what's really important to me is that Dear Esther started out as a Half-Life 2 mod. And if the Half-Life 2 modding community hadn't championed it and celebrated it and downloaded it a lot and talked about it and loved it, then it would never have been a game. So it's never really bothered me, the kind of is it a game conversation, because as far as I can see it, Dear Esther and like everything that's come after it has been inspired by it. This was championed by Half-Life 2 modders, and they made it what it is. And so if you've made something that the real kind of hardcore.
Dear Esther was my first foray into writing music for games, and I actually approached it very traditionally, so more as a film score than a traditional interactive game music score. And what's really interesting for me is that the lack of interactivity in the music was never a problem for anybody that played the game. And that's a separate discussion, but there's a big schism between game music composers of how much the music should be following the player at all times in terms of interactive music. But one of the reasons I wanted to say something at this point was that this was my little first journey into thinking about how you write music for games rather than films. So I had this song that was a certain length, and Dan said, well, we don't know how long the...
I don't know when the paper origami boats first came into things with Esther, really, but it felt like a really amazing metaphor of taking these letters and folding them into boats
Hug
and
the
then
wall.
letting them leave the island, because you kind of, you know, at this point in the
Cross
game,
the
this
bridge
kind
and
of
hug the
realization
wall
is there
in front
that
of
this
you
isn't going
and
to
make
end
your way
well,
towards the right area.
and that the narrator is never leaving the island, and the idea that this kind of, again, the idea of communication, or the attempt or failing communication, or trying to speak through the comb, or whatever it is, however you want to interpret it. But the idea of putting the boat in the underground river really felt like it kind of reinforced that sort of dreamlike kind of quality of the caves, of actually there's something really sad about this one boat, because when you see it go past, you know that even the boats aren't going to leave the island. Like, this is something which doesn't have a tidy, neat kind of like resolution, and there's, even if you don't sort of think about it to that sort of level of depth, there's just something, it's one of those things that I really love about games that you can do, where it's just a moment that has a really distinct emotional tone.
I've not seen an urn.
There's a pause when you see that boat goes past that I just think is, yeah, it's something special you can do with kind of media-like games.
Give me a shout if you've seen it and I've passed it, because I have not found it yet. I did not see it. Midway through the caves, you'll find the first bridge that you can cross. Cross the bridge and then hug the wall in front of you as you make your way toward the right area of this wall to find the urn. It's hard to see. There's a glare going on my TV. Brian or Jason, if you are still with me and you see it, please. It's an urn. Oh, did I get it? Oh, right there. I just stepped on it. All right, found it. All right, so let's see. On the first bridge, on the left cliff bridge of the cave. There's an urn. There's one urn in every level. And you get a trophy for finding all 4 urns. And that was pretty damn hidden. I'm sorry. I'm not finding that shit otherwise. But every time you find the urn of the level, the wind blows the ashes away. So there's something to do with that. Someone's dead. And start talking.
In a lot of ways, the caves were the hardest area of the game to actually write, because we knew we didn't want to have much voiceover in there. I think because of the strength of the music, and this goes right back to the original mod, we wanted that to be the voice and for it to be a chance for Esther to speak rather than the narrator. And we also wanted to have this break, so when the narrator came out from the caves, you had a real definite sense of something happening, and that he had changed as a result of this journey. So it meant it really felt wrong to have a lot of voiceover within there, but then that made it really difficult, because then it was, you had like 4 one-sentence lines in there, and each one of those had to have absolute clarity.
The sound here is a classic case of, again, what music I think does really well, which is you've had this soft, lyrical, beautiful, epic, dreamlike music, and then the moment you come out of the caves, you're into this really harsh soundscape, and the tonal shift is very, very brutal, I think, and deliberately so. You have very little music when you come out of the caves. You hear the wind. I love that there's and
chemical
it's a classic case of foreshadowing. So we know from this point
we don't know why.
that things are probably going to get bleaker, more difficult. And yeah, it's something that music does really well, I think, which is that emotional signalling and signposting.
Hear what? Hear what through the headset? In the water as you enter it. I didn't see commentary. Or is that the one right there? Yeah, I hear them talking. Why, do you not hear them talking? What does this say? Behold, Damascus is taken.
This whole area moved, didn't it? The original mod, this was a cave right at the beginning of the caves where everything was written, and it moved to the back end of the level, and we have this long corridor that's full of these kind of it's the point of high madness, I think, in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of just where you feel like you're losing the plot completely. Both,
you can hear them talking through
visually
the
and
your TV.
Auditory.
Oh, TV has no sound.
It's kind of like
there's no sound coming out of TV.
Frenetic moment for me.
I think it's where you feel most that you're underneath a mountain, and you feel the weight of that mountain, and just I loved the idea when we were, putting through it.
This headset goes on,
what would it actually take
to
do this? Like, to actually paint all these symbols and what is going on, and it's quite an explicit kind of thing of madness, of going, you would have to be insane, or very, very disturbed to actually do this, and what is the process that this person is trying to work through, what they trying to achieve by this. And I think it really strengthened it, making it
part of the actual game.
Crawl through a tunnel as opposed to just a static location.
Yeah, I think it's the consistency and the coherence of the symbols is a lot more broken down as well. Like, you see some symbols before like scattered around the environments, but at this point they're like right in your face, and they're kind of it's just total madness, Any kind of meanings have been crossed over and confused, and, I think it really helps to bring the tension up.
This is a bit more of a contentious one because we disagree on this one. I struggle with this. With the points in the caves where you duck above and below the water, and you have to have that transition of audio, and I love the audio on both sides of the surface tension of the water, but I really struggle with you breaking water because it's such a hard edge to the sound, and I don't think there's any other way around that. And you need to have those moments where you do go underwater because it's so important. But it's one of the areas that's never sat very comfortably with me, because I feel like in a level which hasn't got a single edge in it, it's the one edge within it, and it breaks me.
And that's why I think it's so successful, because you've been lured into this completely hallucinatory, dreamlike world, and then all of a sudden, as a player, you're literally gasping for breath. You're coming up for air, and I think when we're talking about that metaphor of the body, for me, this is...
Here we go.
The motorway scene. The biggest new addition to between the mod and the commercial version. This didn't exist in the mod at all. It was a completely new thing.
Yeah, it's I wasn't sure where the idea spawned from to have this scene, whether I just sort of went off or we discussed it, or I can't remember.
I can't remember. Can you remember? It just kind of appeared.
I don't know how underwater to get
this
car.
I think for me, actually,
So the admission really is that I did play fast and loose with the geography of the M5. There isn't actually a welcome break service. It's just outside the junction of Sanford. But we also know players. I mean, what a thing if you make something that's based vaguely on somewhere in real life. In terms of a compliment, when you're getting emails from players going, there isn't a welcome break there, and people really trying to work out where is this, and whole threads about where on the M5 it is. That's just the most amazing feeling. But I think what I really love what I think works really, really well in Esther, and again it's something that I think is really carried forward to our other games, is that a lot of the time we're not dealing with kind of like big glamorous, amazing, epic place. It's a sort of like a ratty little island in the Hebrides. It's someone who lived in Wolverhampton. It's just outside, a service station on a stretch of the M5. And I think
it's just something different. Same thing as yesterday. I don't want to play something that gets too in depth.
It a realness as well, particularly when
Monday
you
I'll probably play Not a Hero.
The surrealness of the caves. Actually, kind of going, this is really surreal and this is really, really dreamlike. But actually, I'm talking about, a car accident just outside a little chef, and that playing off those two things against each other.
It's like making the ordinary extraordinary.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just die. They do have really, really good lung capacity, don't they?
This scene for me is like really, really iconic because it kind of brings this idea of the caves being an inward journey through the body together. It's really kind of like a symbol of rebirth, and it actually brings together a lot of the visual goals that I wanted to achieve with a lot of the symbolism in the game.
It's taking a lot longer than they said.
I've talked a little bit about how the environment was kind of designed to provoke emotions, and kind of the impressionistic style gives you just enough information to make you think of things and feel things. But this is probably like the antithesis of this. And the whole feeling of rebirth here is quite strong. I know Jess.
Yeah, the music's really supporting that.
Yeah,
because we've gone. She sings always, always throughout. We've got always, always, and then she sings never. And a moment of absolute soaring. It's the climax of the music.
As you come out of the water and the music kind of swells, and you just kind of, it is like a moment of change.
You can't finish the level till he stops talking.
It's rebirth, isn't it? For me, it's his moment of clarity and acceptance and understanding of the reality of what's happened.
And you're literally moving towards the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
You're actually doing that as you go through.
But the music especially, I think before the music got layered in, that scene was nowhere near as kind of powerful for me. Like, that kind of just totally made it.
End my level. Thank you. Give me my trophy. Thank you. Alright, on to the final chapter. Alright, at the start of the chapter. Alright, let's find out what the urn is real quick. The final urn is found on a beach where the candles are lined up. There will be small like fences nearby these candles. The urn is at the top right of these fences. Okay, so keep that in mind. At the start of the chapter, here's the commentary.
Dan and I had worked on lots of projects together, non-game projects, before we made Dear Esther.
I am a trophy whore.
And I think the thing that links all of the projects that we've worked on together is that idea of hidden stories and layers of stories. And one of the things I wanted to do with the music was to embed hidden little hints and stories into it. So the music that you hear here has Morse code. And the Morse code...
Shut up.
It's probably the level which has changed most from the original mod, I think. It's much, much bigger than the final level in the mod. And one of the major changes in there is in the original mod, the whole side of the cliff face was covered in painting and writing. And a lot of that moved inside to that corridor in the caves where it's really obsessionally painted on. And it was really... we spent so long on that because we were trying to get it looking right, because it's one of those really interesting examples where I loved the image and the idea that you've got this guy painting the entire side of a mountain with words and symbols and things. But it was really interesting when it went into the rebuild, it just never worked. And I think it was because the environment was so crude in the mod that those symbols and that painting became the focus of the level, and it changed the feeling of the level completely, when actually that just wasn't something we could realise in any way, that not even technically but just didn't artistically look and feel right. And I think probably sort of retrospectively looking back on it, that's about the sort of the sophistication and the subtlety that then came into the art rather.
I think one of the most fascinating things for me about planning this director's commentary has been that in previous years, when all the three of us have talked about Dear Esther, we've talked about the interpretation of the player. But actually going through this together, post having made it, we're still surprising each other. Yeah, and I think that's really, really interesting for me, because it shows that we left interpretation for each other, and that we trusted each other actually just to get on with it. And because we each brought our own special and unique contribution to the game, we didn't have to, in a way, talk it to death or say you have to justify every idea you have or talk it to death or explain it. That Rob's idea that the island is very tainted and corrupt, and my idea that Dan didn't know that the whole level of the caves is a birth metaphor. I think it's really amazing that we're still finding out things about the game that we didn't know.
I think it was nice when I came onto it, because Dan was basically like, he gave me a bunch of materials, but he left me to my own devices for a lot of it, and we kind of like, I finished a level and Dan would play it and give me some feedback, but he was very kind of like hands off at the beginning, which was really nice, kind of. So a lot of my interpretations just came through that. On a beach where
candles are lined up, there'll be a small fence nearby these candles.
So yeah, it's like interesting to hear Dan talk about it sometimes, because there's some backstory that I've never even considered before, and obviously hearing Jess talk about it as well is really interesting, especially when it comes to the soundtrack. It makes me look at things in a very different way. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I think for me, like making games is so inherently collaborative, and you have people coming together with different ideas and different takes on things, and in a way the least interesting thing you can do with that is to structure it all so heavily that there's no space for each individual person to bring what they're thinking to it. And I think the best games, well, for me, my favourite games are ones where you can really feel the personal footprint of each individual developer and aspects of it, and it feels like it has been a genuinely collaborative exercise where everybody has thrown ideas into the mix and everybody is bringing something to the table, rather than people are just following a kind of a really structured plan. So yeah, I think it probably is one of the reasons why Esther has had the sort of life it's had since release, is because there's 4 people if you include Nigel, all bringing very different things to it, and it gives it a huge amount of depth for something that's so simple on the surface.
I apparently can't get up there yet. Is that the urn? Yes. Give me my trophy. Give me my trophy, goddammit. Alright, I think it gives it to you at the end of the game. Pretty certain of that. Better spend all this time looking for these dead ashes.
One of the really nice things about the move from mod to the commercial version is that we had a couple of years worth of the community talking about the game before we went back into it again. And one of the things that I read on a forum was that someone had constructed this amazing version of the story where they'd thought of that. It was never part of the original writing. And I thought, that's so amazing that as a writer, your audience can find something in what you're doing that you hadn't thought of. So it was really important when we went back in to record the additional set of voiceovers. I thought, I absolutely want to do this. I want to take this idea that's come out of the fans and to run with this and to add an entire new sort of stream of story in there. So we added in a couple of cues within the Force level that intimated much more strongly that actually Paul wasn't this other character who caused the accident, but actually you were responsible for everything. But again, it was then trying to find that balance of not overcooking it, so you weren't led to that idea, but just if you...
I'd been on holiday to Greece lots of times, and one of the things that I always really responded to emotionally was those shrines that you see on the road, and sometimes they're dedicated to saints, and sometimes they're to markate where an accident has taken place. So you'll get photos of the deceased person and flowers and candles, and they'd always really touched me. And so I said to Rob, I think it would be amazing to get these into the game somehow, and then Rob took that idea and ran with it, and I think they're so successful and they're so beautiful and they're really moving, and I think it's because you've had this elemental scale. You have the island and it's huge and you have that scale, and all of a sudden you come around this corner and it's absolutely brought back to the human scale again and to that relationship of the individual. And I think the other thing that it does really successfully is it's a kind of magic realism, because there's no way that you could have all those amounts of candles lighting your way. Who's lit them? The island is empty. Who's put those shrines there? But I just think it's a really lovely bit of environmental storytelling, actually.
Kind of cool. Director's commentary actually helps me out, like it makes me actually know where to go.
What's fascinating to me, Dan, is that you're an atheist, but each of the 3 games that we've made are so strongly about religion, either the language or taking allegories and stories. Why are you so drawn to it?
I think I'm really interested in people and the stories that make up people. And I think there is like in the Bible, like most kind of religious texts, it's not about what it is, it's about what is behind what it is, and that's what you're really getting to, is the idea of the sort of the parable or the metaphor. And it really felt like, particularly with Paul on the road to Damascus, is a story that many people know and we can understand, and it's about redemption and consequence and guilt and transformation and who you really are and what that means. And it felt like just a really strong, powerful way of making it very accessible, the narrator's kind of inner turmoil, in a kind of a story that we know really well. And there's a universality to those kind of questions that, whether it's, Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's kind of Buddhism, that they're asking, is Dear Esther a depressing game or a hopeful game?
For me, it's kind of like a mix of both, really. I think, like, my interpretation is kind of like, I always feel like kind of depressed when I think about the kind of turmoil that this guy's been going through for God knows how long, and the kind of environment he's been in, and all these events surrounding his story. But
so, Dear Esther is the first walking simulator. How do you feel about Walking Simulator?
You know what, I think I took offence to it when it first became a thing, but I think actually I don't mind it so much now. I think the fact that we have kind of taken ownership over it, like that genre has been kind of made our own by not just our game, but like a bunch of different games that kind of embraced it. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I'm still really confused about the need to categorise in games, probably more than any other creative
Gone
industry.
Home, Firewatch,
I think it shows that games have a long way to come in terms of how we describe an experience. So
apparently I like
agree
walking
with Rob,
simulators.
it's really positive that we reclaimed Walking Simulator, but I still find it reductive, possibly, as a term. What about you, Dan?
I think for me, it's people want to know what they're buying and what they're getting into, and I think it's so people understand what a walking simulator is now, in a way that if it was like first-person adventure or slow-moving, not very interactive, story-driven games, they're all sort of really very fluffy. But I think if you buy a game and someone says it's a walking simulator now, you've got a pretty good idea what you're getting. And there's been, there's Gone Home, Firewatch, Stanley Parable. There's so many other really good titles that kind of fall within that group of games out there now, that it does have an identity. And I think that's the really good thing about it. I mean, when Esther came out, there was literally nothing. We had no idea how we described it or what we called it.
We actually struggled with that quite a lot when it came to
marketing, and sort of ended up being sort of like a ghost story, because it felt like it was the closest thing we could get. But it feels like now you can make a game like this and you can say it's a walking simulator, and people will know what it is straight away.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing is there's a whole group of games out there now that quite comfortably put themselves into that category. And so it's like if we were to come out before and just said it's a walking simulator, people would have been like, well, that sounds terribly boring. That doesn't.
The last level ended up being quite a lot bigger than the original mod, and it's also the one where actually the movement around it is in a way the most artificial. There's the big zigzagging cliff paths that basically it's like a series of straight lines from point to point. There isn't a lot of movement, and one of the things that was really difficult to do with that was to not make it feel too much like a corridor and to give it that sort of sense of space and that you were actually exploring somewhere quite natural. I think, Rob, there was stuff which you put in there, like little new beat moments, like the ruins at the edge of the cliff, that just helped the player feel like they were on a journey rather than being pushed through a pipe.
Yeah, there's
a bit of an illusion of simplicity with games like Dear Esther that people kind of assume, because there's not a lot of mechanics and there's not much going on in that sense, that they're easy to make. And I think actually it's kind of the opposite in a way, that because they're so simple, everything is exposed and everything has to be exceptionally good for it to work, because you're carrying a player's experience on a fairly sparse, minimal kind of framework, and that really means that every aspect of it has to be produced at a really high.
One of the things that I think was added more frequently in the final version of Dear Esther was the inclusion of a number of ghosts in the game. These are not like ghosts that you'd see in a normal horror game. They're just very loose silhouettes that you'll see around the island, usually like quite a distance off, or just kind of somewhere that you'd barely see it out the corner of your eye. I think this is a good example of where it's kind of really in your face, and these are kind of just something that we put in to kind of not just bring some unreal elements to the island, but something supernatural as well, something that's kind of beyond this world, something kind of unsettling.
The Overlook, the point about this to me is that it's probably the voiceover in the game that kind of sums up the whole story and the experience. It's almost like a recap of everything that's gone before you start the final climb. And you know it's that pause before you're going to start the final climb.
I wonder if they actually tell a story without the commentary.
Kind of builds to a climax.
I wonder if we're missing that.
You can also see the whole level, and it's like the idea that you are standing looking down on your own journey, a bit like the idea of your life flashing before your eyes, or sort of like seeing your body but having an out-of-body experience at the moment of death. And it was really designed to try and get that feeling as the player, that you stop and you take stock of everything, and there's a bit of a sense of there's no going back. You take a breath and now it finishes. And I really wanted to kind of achieve that sort of sense, and I think we did. I think it really came together here, that you got that sense of going, right, now this ends and now I move forwards to it.
So here it kind of, the environment becomes a little bit more surreal again. We kind of play with the colours a little bit, bring up the saturation. It's kind of a little bit of a return to some of the more cave-like aesthetics in terms of colours and stuff like that. And it's kind of there to kind of signpost another significant moment in the game or something that's leading up to the significant moment. It goes back to this kind of idea of having these emotional signposts in the visuals of the game without it being overly obvious, and some of that emotional stuff comes.
The music that's playing here is a repeat of another cue, and originally we hear it played on the piano, and the string quartet take on the piece here. And it's one of those really nice instances where we were in the studio and I had this idea of how it was going to sound, and I thought it was going to be quite full and rich and, yeah, full-bodied. And then one of the string players said to me, this is wrong, actually, for what we're playing. And they said, let's strip out all the vibrato, let's play it in a really Scottish, plain.
It was possible that this last section of the game could have felt quite laborious and forced because it's two long zigzagging paths that just go up, and there was a real importance to getting it right. Quite a lot of work went into it. I think at this point for me, you probably as a player understand that the narrator's going to die at the end, and that this is it. And that unlike where the rest of the island, there's this sense of this could just keep going on forever and ever and ever, and you're going to keep the motif of come back.
Get it right here.
But I think when you set on this path, we really wanted to have that sense of...
Yes.
With the climb being quite a poignant moment of the game overall and of the story, it was quite a difficult task to try and make that climb still interesting and not too laborious, because it's kind of this zigzag up there with nothing really. There's no real environment.
Found every single commentary.
The sea on one side and the cliff face on the other,
and all the urns. I'm not sure why they didn't give me that.
There was quite a lot of work that went into kind of building up this feeling of tension as you're rising and kind of.
What is the name of that trophy? Because I should have had that.
As poignant as possible while still making it interesting. So a lot of effort was put into building up this weather, building up the winds and the swaying of the grass and kind of the volume of the soundscapes and everything mixing together with the music and just kind of visually really trying to make this a tense moment. And I think it's hopefully been pulled off all right.
You have to finish the chapter. You're on the count. Okay.
Tension dies, and that's very purposeful. You'll see no more wind. It's just kind of like a symbolic thing where you.
I want to finish this game with like no commentary, no one talking, and
the last moment, the point of no return, and that's been very deliberately designed that way.
All right, now shut up and let me watch the end of this game. Something better happen. Now my dog's making noise. Shut up! She's hearing me. Whoop, whoop. Look at that view. Just, I don't even care if there is no point to the story, or if there is no story. It was just a fun experience. For like $3-4, pretty cool. Would I play it again? No, not unless I missed a trophy or something, but even then, I don't think I was coming back to it. That's why it was so important for me to collect them all and get all the commentaries out of the way. Getting up to the communication tower here. Weather's getting crazy.
We had a lot of debates, didn't we, about the ending of the game and whether the player should retain control or whether it was okay to go to a cutscene at this point. I personally don't mind it. I actually actively like it because I think it works really well as a metaphor for loss of control at that point. Dan, I know you're not as keen.
Yeah, I'm not. I would have loved the player not to have had control taken away from them, but to me it was a balance between two evils. The evil of having a cutscene and the evil of the player accidentally falling off the ladder halfway up and destroying the ending.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we tried a few different things, and the tech at the time just wasn't, the ladder tech at the time just wasn't there. So, and the other thing for me was pacing. It was making sure all the music, the voiceovers, the timings and everything were perfect for that final jump off point, and just letting the players kind of noodle around going up a ladder for what may have been like 7 minutes, because it's a tall tower, was kind of an impossible task.
One of the things that I enjoyed the most on working on Dear
jump off
Esther
the tower?
was Rob's beautiful visuals were so inspiring, but Dan's words are always so amazing to write to. I think that's where we start as a partnership. And the music at the end was so easy to write, because that last voiceover, it's the pinnacle of the writing to me, as it should be, because it's the last VO, so it would have failed if it wasn't good. But it is just so beautiful and moving. And for me, talking about whether it's a hopeful ending, the music is really hopeful at this point. And it signifies to me transformation, freedom, escape, acceptance. Yeah, and it was just a beautiful cue to write, actually.
I don't know, I can't remember quite where it came from in the mod, but the moment when we went, or we could put the bird in there, and you could see the bird's shadow, and actually it turned from being kind of like a straightforward literal suicide into a metaphorical, or to my mind, kind of like, I always really believed the narrator did turn into a bird just before they hit the ground, and that was really important. I think it's probably the strongest ending in any of our games so far. But yeah, I'm very proud of the way everything came together in that last section.
Yeah, I think it's the bird thing is particularly interesting, because I think it was in the original mod, but the timings and everything were just all off, and you never really saw the seagull. At least the shadow as well. It was all kind of like a little bit broken. And I remember when we went back in, I made a real effort to try and get that shadow just out of the center of the view, so you kind of have this hint of something happening, and I think you can hear the sound of a seagull flapping its wings. It's like very subtle, but like you say, I kind of really like the way that came together. It kind of it's very like say, it's kind of like a release, but at the same time there's still this kind of ambiguity there that's kind of beautiful.
And I'm really proud that I got the monitor in at the end for ending of, it goes into the hospital monitor, signifying the flat line. And I think it's one of those moments where you never want to be so clever that people notice it and it takes them out of the moment, but it just flows in through the music, and it just feels like everything comes together at that last point. That last VO, Rob's amazing visuals and the music, and it feels like a really, really strong and beautiful ending.
And then in the last second, Nigel Carrington's delivery of just those two words have come back, where he just pitch perfect.
Yeah. So that's the end of the director's commentary. We'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone for listening. We hope you've uncovered some secrets and some facts that you didn't know about the game before.
We'd also like to say a huge thank you for buying the game, and for all our fans who've been behind us and been behind the game and have kept it alive all these years. It's a real privilege to...
I have a feeling if I play this game without the commentary, there's actually going to be some talking and story to
this. Yeah, we're really looking forward to the future and what we can create coming up next. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Bye.
Now give me my rest of my trophies. Dan, Jess, Adam, Stuart. Where the fuck is my earn trophy? God damn it. I may have to play this again. Right there, voice acting. Nigel Carrington, they were just talking about him. There are no voices. Oh, I have a feeling I would have had voices. Yeah, I wasn't impressed either, Brian. That's the game. I mean, like you said, beautiful game. I mean, it was very relaxing. I think. Just give me a second. Let the credits roll. I'm going to run through and see if I start it without the commentary, if it actually would give me a story. I don't think that was the game. I think because we turned the commentary on, it killed the voiceover work and put the commentary in. I think it was one or the other. I don't think you could have both. So I just have a feeling that's kind of where we went wrong, unfortunately. If I had known that, I wouldn't have cared about that trophy so much. I would have actually just put the story on. Because they were talking about it, like about the dying and the ultrasounds and all that kind of stuff. They were talking about voiceover work all throughout this game, and yeah, I don't know. Something just seems off. So um, let's get through these credits real quick, because then I gotta go. Still gotta unclog that sink. I have not gotten to that yet. Oh my god, I'm gonna get killed. um, okay. I don't believe I got the trophy. I'm gonna check real quick because that's gonna really piss me off if I didn't get that. Let me see. Nope. I am missing. Hold on. Yeah, I'm missing the urn trophy. I never got it. And then there's also one to trigger all voiceover points. So I actually have to play through it twice, don't I? Son of a bitch. Alright, well, I'm not gonna play through it with you guys watching because I know you guys don't want to see it again. Uh, only 9.8% of the people who have played this game have actually gotten the voiceover or the director's commentary trophy, which is actually the rarest trophy of them all. So that's kind of cool. There's two trophies I'm missing. It's the uncover 4 urns, which I think I kind of got cheated on. I feel I got those, but it is what it is. I'll have to do it again, and then trigger all the voiceover points. So let's just try this out real quick, just for fun. Let's go to. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Crap. I don't know why I hit resume. Probably at my last exit to main menu. Alright, now if we go to start, take the director's commentary off. Just for fun, let's start the first chapter again and see what happens. There's gotta be some voiceover work explaining the story of the game.
Dear Esther.
Yep.
I've lost track of how long I've been here, and how many visits I have made overall. Certainly the landmarks are now so familiar to me that I have to remind myself to actually see the forms and shapes in front of me. I could stumble blind across these rocks, the edges of these precipices, without fear of missing my step and plummeting down to sea. Besides, I've always considered that if one is to fall, it is critical to keep one's eyes firmly open.
So now you get the music, you get the environment, you get the feeling of the music behind it, and you get a story. Son of a bitch. I wish I had done this the first time. Crap. So how do I get that voiceover one? Commentary. When you start a new game, make sure the director's commentary isn't checked in the box below starting chapter. The trophies for triggering all voiceover points of the game isn't missable due to there being a chapter select feature, but if you did miss something, you need to try and guess what you've missed. There's no tracking or statistics, or you can simply follow what I've written below. There's 35 voiceover points, although some of them are story related. There are ones that aren't story related, can easily be missed. Alright, so basically I need to do another playthrough. So, alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for me today because I don't have any more time. I got to go finish that sync up. Hopefully you guys somewhat enjoyed at least hanging out and just seeing a different game. I apologize that I fucked it up basically, but I would have rather heard the story points and gone back to the director's commentary on the side. Maybe I'll stream this on Monday. Maybe we'll hit this one up on Monday and do it with the actual story, so we can actually hear the story behind it. That might be interesting and something that hopefully, Brian, let me know if that would be something you'd actually want to see, because otherwise I'll just do it on my own time and not worry about streaming it a second time just to get the story behind it. But let me know. But for the most part, like I said, 2 trophies I have left. I'm not sure why I didn't get the urn trophy, but it is what it is. I'll just get it. I'll try to make sure I find them this time around. I mean, I found them. I'll just make sure I do it correctly. So that's going to wrap it up for Dear Esther, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. See you guys Monday. Till next time, guys, AC Card Shark. Take care.